There is a letter circulating right now among many of the major corporate news sites that runs with a headline that goes something like this. This one from Deadline: hundreds of doctors sign open letter asking Spotify to address mass misinformation events take aim at Joe Rogan's show. Or this from Rolling Stone: a menace to public health. Doctors demand Spotify puts an end to COVID lies on Joe Rogan Experience. This is Daily Mail. 270 doctors and scientists sign open letter to Spotify calling for it to stop Joe Rogan from spreading anti-vax misinformation after he hosted virologists who called vaccination program a mass formation psychosis. They're talking about Dr. Robert Malone, who has been on a couple of times. This one: 270 scientists write letter to Spotify on Joe Rogan's dangerous COVID misinformation. Maxim: 270 doctors and scientists sign open letter urging Spotify to monitor the Joe Rogan Experience for COVID misinformation. The wrap we have here: Joe Rogan targeted by over 260 scientists in open letter urging Spotify to take action on mass information events. I read the letter and I counted the amount of people that were listed on there. I counted 260, not trying to split hairs here. But there are a couple other things that are either odd, not just about the letter itself, but also about the media coverage. So the first thing is the fact that these headlines, as I just showed you, talk about how doctors and scientists, and some of them are just like 270 scientists or almost 300 scientists and doctors. Actually, that's not really the case. This is the list of people who signed it, and it's not false to say that there are doctors and scientists on here. There are many doctors and scientists on here. We could debate whether all of the doctors or even the majority of the doctors and scientists specialize in what Dr. Malone specializes in, and whether they have the same kind of background and training to say that he of all people should be censored. Okay, we could debate that. But yes, there are doctors and scientists on here. But let me just show you some other sort of interesting, I don't know, perhaps you would not necessarily consider these people doctors and scientists, though maybe some of you would say, but yeah, really, like, debating, what Dr. Malone was talking about, like they deserve to have their voices heard, but he doesn't with his background. So let me just show you some of them, okay? Host science correspondent for a podcast. Okay, interesting. We have associate medical writer. Now, this person's a PhD, but they're a writer, and then a science correspondent for another podcast. We have a research fellow for, or called a science communicator. Okay, that's interesting. We have a licensed clinical social worker. And also, this is one interesting one that I found. Also an editor, Unbiased Science Podcast, another podcast here. An associate veterinarian, and then this guy I looked up, director of research for Grasshopper Farms. I was like, what's Grasshopper Farms? And I looked him up. It is cannabis. Okay? He's a cybersecurity consultant. A veteran DC ops technician with IBM Cloud, and an educational content creator who makes videos about science, math, and technology on the popular social media platform TikTok. That's what his LinkedIn profile says. Okay, let's keep going. It's fun, right? There's a dentist. There's a dentist on here. There is a writer-researcher, MA, a master's degree writer-researcher. I don't know in what. And we continue down. A licensed marriage and family therapist. I know that there is also, okay, here we go. Master's student, University of Tulsa. What are you getting the master's in? I have a Master of Divinity degree. I'm not sure that means that I'm qualified to say Joe Rogan should be censored along with Dr. Robert Malone. I don't know. And again, you know what? Maybe you don't like Dr. Malone, but let's have a fair, objective discussion about censorship today, and not necessarily just about him specifically, but about the precedent it says set, and then also how these arguments and this dialectic continues to unfold for us. Okay, keep going. We have a head of veterinary translational medicine. Maybe you call them a doctor scientist. Okay, they get to be in, but it's veterinary medicine. Hey, keep going. Science correspondent, so another science writer, basically. Keep going. Bear with me. Sorry. It's going to get good. It's going to get good. I promise. Okay. This is another one. This is an occupational therapist, a licensed occupational therapist, like somebody who would tell you you should use a standing desk at work. Okay. That's who that person is. And we have another senior communications consultant. We have a PhD student. So just a person who's getting their PhD. We have another science communicator. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. We're just going to go through the whole list because why not? We're in the M's. At this point, we're in the M's. We have a science teacher here. Okay, a science teacher. Another veterinarian. A medical student. Okay, all right. A subject matter expert with a PsyD, an instructor, I guess this would be a science teacher at Shoreline Community College, which I believe is in Western Washington, where I used to be a TV news reporter. Keep going, keep going, keep going. We've got another student. Got another student here. We have a chief of Division of Complex Family Planning. That's an MD. Another licensed clinical worker. Okay, that's interesting. Some other like CEOs and you know of different companies and this is something I'll talk about in a second, but is there somebody backing this and who is it, and are there conflicts of interest here? Like is there a reason that they might be concerned about somebody questioning the things that Dr. Malone questioned or Joe Rogan questions on his podcast? I mean, I don't know. What is there a conflict of interest in whoever's behind this? I don't know, because we don't know who's really behind this, or at least I haven't been able to find that. It's not listed here. Okay, I'm gonna keep going because we're in the S's. Why not? Right? We're almost done. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. We got a bunch of professors, science correspondent, professor, so a lot of professors, and a PhD student. That's how it ends. Another thing that I thought was kind of weird about this is that if we look at the letter again, an open letter to Spotify, a call from the global scientific and medical communities to implement a misinformation policy, that's what it's called. The second paragraph starts with this line: "We are a coalition of scientists, medical professionals, professors, and science communicators spanning a wide range of fields, such as microbiology, immunology, epidemiology, and neuroscience, and we are calling on Spotify to take action against the misinformation events which continue to occur on its platform." So what I want to know is, what is this coalition? Is this an organized coalition? Is this just some random people who started a phone tree or a letter tree? Like, whose idea was this to write the letter? And if it's not just a random organizing of people, who's doing the organizing? I think this is a valid question. Anytime something like this comes out where it's like, we're calling for action, I want to know, who is the coalition? Who put these folks together? Is there a conflict of interest? Who's behind it? Like that's a fair question to ask here, but we don't really know that, especially not from reading the articles. Before we get to the rest of this video, don't forget you can support my work by also checking out my sponsors and having a glass of wine or a cup of coffee in honor of free speech. The first is AllisonWinePromo.com, Allison with 1L winepromo.com. You get 50% off of my favorite Argentinian Malbecs and 50% off of shipping. They have switched out the 3 bottles from the last pairing, so check them out. Many of these are high altitude wines. They're very robust. They use no flavoring, no filtering, no dyes, and no excess chemicals. But if you need something to wake you up, like a strong cup of coffee, check out twinenginecoffee.com/Allison, twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. They've got a wide variety of roasts. These are high altitude, shade grown Nicaraguan coffees that are also USDA certified organic. So check out my sponsors and support free speech wherever you are. If you go back to the articles like this Rolling Stone article, the subheadline is, "Unlike many platforms, Spotify doesn't have a clear policy prohibiting misinformation. 270 physicians and scientists are hoping to change that." Okay, again, that's misleading. and I think it's just interesting too, okay? This is the final sort of just mystery to me about this letter, is that even Rolling Stone, if you scroll down in their article, they actually interviewed one of the people who signed the letter. This person specifically is a doctor. But they say here the letter was initially appended with a lengthy fact check of all of the claims presented in Malone's interview with Rogan, from the mass formation psychosis supposition to Malone's claim that the Biden administration is suppressing evidence supporting the efficacy of a drug that I'm not even going to say on YouTube, but I do say that word very many times on my other platforms, which is why you should definitely get off YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube and go to one of those platforms, and definitely check out AllisonMorrow.locals.com. There will be a trailer for why you should go over there at the end of this video. But going back to that appendage that originally was part of the letter, doing all this hardcore fact-checking of Dr. Malone, well, if we go back to the letter, you will see that it's not there anymore. There's just the letter and then the list of people. Okay? What happened to the fact check? What happened to the fact check? Why isn't it still here? This is how it ends. This is not only a scientific or medical concern, it is a sociological issue of devastating proportions. A sociological issue? What does that mean? So that's another question I have. Spotify is responsible for allowing this activity to thrive on its platform. We, the undersigned doctors, nurses, scientists, and educators, thus call on Spotify to immediately establish a clear and public policy to moderate misinformation on its platform. You know, it's interesting because I'm not going to go into all of the things that they criticize that podcast for, but one specifically, right, is this mass formation psychosis. There's not really any way for you to prove 100% without a doubt that there isn't something like mass formation psychosis going on. How do you prove that is not going on? You know what they use as their unfounded theory? This, the AP, fact focus, unfounded theory used to dismiss COVID measures by the AP, which never gets it wrong, okay? And, you know, the AP just says, but psychology experts say the concept described by Malone is not supported by evidence and is similar to theories that have long been discredited. And then they go on to do their fact check. But, you know, other experts have said that it is happening, and they are experts. This is one of the things that drives me nuts about the way that mainstream news has been covering COVID since the very beginning. It's often set up as like this fringe crazy person against the experts, and rarely are honest about the fact that there are many experts that align with their fringe crazy person that is being maligned by mainstream news. That there's quite a bit of variety out there, but that's kind of hidden, and it's just like this guy versus the experts. That happens constantly. So just word to the wise, if you're listening to something you're like, yeah, but experts say, it's like, well, which experts? Who are they? And in this article, they do list people that tell them, but there are just as many, you know, people that you could bring up as in this article. There's like, you know, one or a couple people, right, that are talking about this. Well, I could find a couple people that totally disagree with them that aren't Dr. Malone. So then you just go back and forth. So anyway, this is all just to say, I think the letter's kind of weird. It's just kind of weird to me. It's weird to me that they apparently had some kind of massive fact check at the end of it that I don't see there anymore. I don't know what happened to it. It's weird to me that somehow this messaging of almost 300 scientists and doctors are writing this, when in fact I showed you that actually it's not composed of almost 300 doctors and scientists, okay? There's quite a variety of people there. Not that they don't have a right to sign that letter, but let's just be honest when we're covering this, like who's actually signing that, all right? And then finally, let's talk about just censorship, generally speaking. We all know that this has been a hot topic, especially under COVID, and that there are calls for people who are allegedly undermining public safety to be deplatformed. And my question for those people who still support that is let's take an honest look at, first off, how bad should it be before somebody gets taken off the air? Because depending on where your line is, the corporate news that you cited, like the AP in that article, in the scientific letter, I should say, that's misinformation, right? They've spread misinformation before. The AP has, okay? They've gotten things wrong. So, like, how bad does it have to be for somebody to be deplatformed? Because, like I said, depending on your line, like, every outlet would be deplatformed at this point. That's the funny thing about censorship. It often is pointing towards sort of like the smaller, non-corporate voices and acting like there's never misinformation anywhere else, or that there shouldn't be a misinformation policy in mainstream news. Like, why never go after the mainstream news stations and say they should have a misinformation policy? You just rarely see that, right? Because they're all kind of like playing for the same team, I guess. So it's like, first off, ask yourself, how bad should it be before somebody gets censored? Because again, your friends that you think are on your team might fall in your category of deserving to be censored, depending on the topic. Secondly, once you decide how bad it's going to be, when you can bring the axe down on somebody, who's going to do it? Like, who decides? Who makes the decision for how bad it's got to be, and then who's going to be included in the deplatform? Who's that going to be? Is that going to be a tech company? Is that going to be the Department of Health? Is that going to be the government in some other fashion? Is that going to be Congress? Is that going to be who? Who is that going to be? And then ask yourself if they always get it right. So, do they always get it right? Should they have that kind of power? And then finally, how does debate and change and scientific thought occur over time? It occurs through the process of allowing different voices at the table, and then through the voracious and energized discussion of people with different perspectives, we get closer to the truth. But we haven't historically gotten closer to the truth by throwing people into bodies of water to see if they float and are evil, or burning them at the stake, or in any other way silencing them. That really has not necessarily shown well historically on those who made those decisions in the name of public safety or truth or religion or whatever else it is. I'm going to leave it here. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to go to my other platforms, and I'll see you next time. One of the best places to go is AllisonMorrow.locals.com, where you can become part of my editorial board and pose questions ahead of time for interviews. I also do live editorial board meetings on Saturdays. You can bring your feedback and pose ideas for guests and topics for the week to come, and you get exclusive content. So go to AllisonMorrow.locals.com. But whatever you do, don't stay here on YouTube. If you want the full truth about what's happening around us, you gotta go somewhere else.